It's only day 26 of the second Trump administration, and we're following the escalating showdown at the Department of Justice over the corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Just hours ago, a motion was filed to dismiss the charges without prejudice. It reads in part, the acting deputy attorney general concluded that dismissal is necessary because of appearances of impropriety and risks of interference with the 2025 elections in New York City. The acting deputy attorney general also concluded that continuing these proceedings would interfere with the defendant's ability to govern in New York City. This motion comes after 7 prosecutors resigned rather than follow the acting deputy attorney general Emil Bovie's order to dismiss the case. That list of 7 includes the lead prosecutor, Hagen Scotton, who wrote in his resignation letter the following. Any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials, in this way. If no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me. Then acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Danielle Sassoon, accusing Mayor Adams' attorneys of pushing for a quid pro quo on behalf of their client. In her letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, she outlined their suggestion that the mayor would assist with immigration enforcement in exchange for a dismissal. Adams strongly denied those allegations today in a statement, and this morning, Adams defended himself on Fox News alongside what appeared to be almost like his handler, Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. Take a listen.
Imagine him going inside saying that the only way Mayor Adams is going to assist in immigration, which I was calling for since 2022, right, is if you drop the charges. That's quid pro quo. That's a crime.
If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, yeah, right, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to?
Unbelievable. Adams has pleaded not guilty to all of those federal charges. But there's something that we want to emphasize here. The motion seeks dismissal without prejudice. That means that federal prosecutors could seek to reinstate the charges against Eric Adams at any time. For instance, if he were to stop cooperating with Trump's immigration policies. Now that is a carrot and a stick. With that, let's bring in our lead-off panel. Katie Benner, Pulitzer Prize-winning correspondent for the New York Times. Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent for Vanity Fair and an MSNBC contributor. And Barbara McQuade, a veteran federal prosecutor and former United States attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Her new book, Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America, is out now. I am speechless. Rarely happens, as the three of you know me so well. With what's transpiring, I'm relieved to have the three of you here. Barb, let's start with you. You know the law. You know the process. Let's talk about that motion to dismiss that was filed just a few hours ago. I want to talk about Judge Dale Ho and his role in whether or not this case gets dismissed against Eric Adams. Judge Ho clerked for the Southern District of New York, as well as the New York Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state of New York. There's going to be a hearing, right, Barb, about what is going on behind the scenes here?
Well, it's quite possible, Katie. You know, there's a rule of criminal procedure, Rule 48, that says before a prosecutor may dismiss a case, they need to obtain leave of court. And it's usually fairly routinely given, but remember, a grand jury returned this indictment, and so it is not lightly dismissed. I remember when I was U.S. attorney, I would, on rare occasion, sign one of these motions to dismiss an indictment, and we had to specify the reason. Usually it was a defendant died, a witness died, evidence had been suppressed such that we didn't think we could go forward and obtain a conviction, something along those lines. But in this case, where it's so highly unusual, I imagine there will be a hearing, and Judge Ho has the right and responsibility to do that, to make sure that two things are protected here. One is the right of the defendant, that they're not being jerked around by a prosecutor who's filing charges and then withdrawing them and filing them again. But the other is to protect the public, to make sure that the prosecutor isn't simply dismissing a case for personal reasons or some other improper reason, a political reason. And so I think Judge Ho would be well within his rights to require a hearing, to bring Emil Bove or someone else before the court to ask what on earth is going on here and be satisfied that there's a lawful reason for upending this indictment that was returned by a grand jury.
Barb, a quick follow-up, though. Let's just say that Judge Ho does not agree and does not give leave of court to the DOJ to drop these charges. How do you continue to prosecute a case if the prosecutors themselves don't want to do so?
Yeah, I don't think he has that power to do that. Based on our constitutional separation of powers doctrine, the prosecutor gets to decide and has discretion to decide whether to bring a case. And so I don't know that he can force them to continue to prosecute this case, but I do think he can ask them some hard questions under oath and require them to do that before he grants them the leave they request.
You know, Katie Benner, you used to cover this department. You still know everything that really kind of goes on the ins and outs of the DOJ. What are you hearing from the people who still remain at the DOJ? There's a lot of emperor has no clothes. There's a lot of, we're seeing behind the otherwise kind of closed curtains that usually happens on what happens internally at the DOJ.
Yes. I mean, I think that this case has really, first of all, I've spoken to several people who are still working at the Justice Department in various capacities, whether it's Civil Rights Division, criminal, national security, different U.S. attorneys' offices. And what they're saying is they are trying to decide almost hour by hour now whether or not they really want to stay and continue to work at the Justice Department. And it kind of breaks down along, I would say, two main lines of thought. First is this idea that they believe that they know how to uphold the rule of law. They want to abide by the Constitution, and they want to do a great job for the American public. And they're worried that if they leave, they will cede that spot to somebody who does not have those intentions. So there's a desire by some to simply just stay and do the work as well as they can. Of course, they're worried about firings. They're worried about retaliatory firings. They're worried about losing jobs. Keep in mind, these are civil servants who do not make a tremendous amount of money, and they have children, they have families, they have mortgages. So they also live in fear of having to do something they would not want to in order to keep the job. The other thing I'm starting to hear, which I find really fascinating, is an idea that's starting to percolate inside of the Justice Department that I don't know that the general public has, and I don't know if the general public has framed Trump's actions vis-a-vis the department this way, but I've spoken with two people who have taken the totality of Trump's actions against the Justice Department, with the case regarding Eric Adams as the most obvious and the most public instance of Trump basically trying to say, I am now the rule of law. This department is the only department. It's the only department named after an ideal. People say that over and over again, after a value. This department is now a department that represents Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's whims are supplanting the rule of law. You can see it in the dismissal of the J6, the folks who were convicted in the J6 cases. You can see it in this threat to purge the FBI of people who are not considered by Donald Trump to be loyal. You see it in him using the Justice Department to basically clear away obstacles for his agenda. Those obstacles used to be leaders in places like New York, like California, and he's trying to find leverage over them again in order to make sure that he is the final rule and he's the final voice. And so this is something that people inside the department are starting to articulate in, I think, a new way, which is they're seeing in real time, faster than the American public, just a little bit faster than the American public, what it looks like when a president tries to supplant the rule of law with his own whims.
And speaking of Molly, Trump was asked about the Adams motion to dismiss today. Take a quick listen to what his response was.
What's your reaction to that and to the overall implication that politics were at play here?
Well, I don't know about it. I mean, obviously, I'm not involved in that. But I would say this, that if they had a problem, and these are mostly people from the previous administration, you understand, so they weren't going to be there anyway. They were going to all be gone or dismissed. But I know nothing about the individual case. I know that they didn't feel it was much of a case. They also felt that it was unfair with the election.
Okay, and I want to fact check in real time, Molly, what was just said, because that's not true. What Donald Trump said right now is not true. One, Danielle Sassoon, the then acting U.S. attorney, Molly, of the Southern District of New York, she was a Trump appointed Southern District New York AG, okay? And two, as evidenced in the letter that Sassoon wrote to Attorney General Pam Bondi, everyone on the team, everybody in that office dealing with this case said that the case was strong and that there was evidence. In fact, she was bringing a superseding indictment to add additional charges, including obstruction of justice. So Trump there, again, misleading Americans, but his answer, let's be honest, was not exactly an enthusiastic statement of support of Eric Adams's innocence there.
Well, look, there are a number of problems here. One is that, you know, there has been a lot of talk about Eric Adams, the charges, the superseding. I mean, there have been a lot of people resigned. It has never looked like a mayoral administration that seemed without problems and possible lots of other stuff. The other thing is Sassoon, of course, is a Trump appointee. She was a Federalist Society member. She clerked for a very conservative justice. I mean, she's not some liberal. The question is, and I think the calculus was that these people did not want to sort of, you know, ruin their, I mean, remember lawyers, there's the Bar Association. Like, as you know, as you're a lawyer, being a lawyer is you have a sort of higher calling, right? You have an organization that makes you behave ethically. And the Bar Association just sort of sent out a big letter that was basically like, you know, sort of don't do the, you know, kind of don't go along with this stuff. So I don't think it's a huge surprise to see that I think 7 people resigned. I mean, you know, this is an ethical question here. And I think a lot of people were not willing to sort of go down in flames for a guy who really has no constituency. And I don't think this should be a huge surprise.